All right, everyone, welcome. My name is Vincent Cruz, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the virtue of humility. I get the honor and the privilege of presenting this slideshow to you, and I'm happy that you get to go through this and learn about humility. And so let's dive right in. I wanted to start off with a Bible verse. It comes from Luke chapter 14, verse 11, and it states, "For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted." And we're going to come back to that Bible verse and a couple of other Bible verses. But I believe that that one, Luke 14:11, is probably the main Bible verse that we're going to encompass this whole presentation on. So, Merriam Webster defines humility as freedom from pride or arrogance, the quality or state of being humble. And so, both humble and humility, they have their origin in the Latin word humilis, meaning low. And so we see countless times of, Jesus explaining to his disciples, humility and the need to be humble in many aspects. And further down in the presentation, we're going to talk about that is one of the main teachings of Jesus. And so in Proverbs 11:2, we see that when pride comes, then disgrace. But when humility comes, wisdom. And so next, we're going to talk about humility, in my opinion. And then we're going to break it down into three parts. So, humility in sports, humility in life, everyday life, and then humility in relationships. Right? And so, in sports, I believe that humility is really that inner strength in you that allows you to grow and succeed without the need for validation or spotlight. And in my opinion, that's how we conduct ourselves as coaches in our everyday lives and in our everyday interactions with our team. So modeling the behavior and praying and hoping that the arrogant will find their way, to be humble. And then if we're talking about humility in life and everyday relationships, I believe it's about embracing a mindset of respect, openness, and self-awareness. So it's just choosing when to show the virtue and know that, like, your team is watching, right? Your team is watching everything that you do. And so just being that model, being that leader in showing what humility looks like in our everyday lives. And then, like I said, it's about respect, about openness and self-awareness, right? And so I think also with humility in life and everyday relationships, one of the main things is that it's recognizing that we're all constantly learning, right? And there's no one that is above making mistakes, right? So and so in relationships, and I think that this is one of the biggest things, right? Because as coaches, we're called to be a transformational coach, and it starts with the relationships that we build. And I think that in this instance, right, humility means listening more than speaking, valuing others' perspectives, and be willing to admit when you're wrong. And so I think that that's the biggest takeaway is that the relationships that we build, we have to model humility in it. We have to. We cannot be arrogant. We can't just say I'm the coach and that's what I say goes, right? And we cannot do that. And so what I wanted to do was give you some examples, right? There's a movie called Coach Carter. I'm pretty sure all of us have seen it or heard of it. And so his questions to the athletes were, since when is winning not enough? When is playing hard not enough? And then he humbles them in saying that they've only won 4 games last season, and then goes on to say, what gives you the right to wear Richmond on your chest and act like punks? And so I think that this scene is really a really good scene to show, and in my opinion, a pretty aggressive way to show humility. But what it does is Coach Carter really does ground them and bring them back to reality. And then the uh, the scene that I wanted to talk to you guys about for the humility in life, and specifically embracing a mindset of respect, openness, and self awareness, comes from a movie called The Pursuit of Happiness. Um, and what it really tackles is the scene specifically is we're all learning, and no one is above making mistakes, right? And the scene that I want to talk about is the scene where he's given the job, um, and it's just such a emotional scene, right? Because you see him, he rose to the top, he put in the work. It was tough. He was very um, he was a go getter, right? He didn't settle. He always put everything like into the job because he knew that he had to for his family. But through everything, he stayed humble through the process. So when we listen first and we have thoughtful responses, we are doing what James described in his book as being doers of the word, right? And so in James 1, chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, James states that, "Know this, my dear brothers, everyone should be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for wrath of a man does not accomplish the righteousness of God." Um, so how do we do that? How do we coach humility, right? And so the best way that I can think of, and I think that you and I would agree, is to model it with our everyday actions, interactions, anything, anything we do, model humility, right? That's the best way to teach it. Because if our athletes see that we're doing it, there's no reason why they can't do it, right? There's a coach, John Wooden, who would mop or sweep his gym floor in the middle of the week. Um, and so if one person catches us in the act of doing something with humility and with grace and with love, maybe that will be the day that we reach someone who needs to be humbled, who needs to be loved at that moment. Um, and so just modeling it in our everyday lives. I think as a coach, one other way to teach humility is by owning up to our mistakes and being able to admit when we're wrong. I will tell you this all throughout Scripture. Um, Humility is etched everywhere, right? I personally think that humility was a core principle that Jesus taught throughout his ministry. We see it in Luke 14:11. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. And we also see that in Matthew 23:12, the exact same, scenario. We also see it in the Beatitudes. It talks solely about humility, right? And so if this was the case where humility was at the core of Jesus' teachings, then as coaches, I think that if in taking these courses and everything, if we're striving to be a transformational coach, then I honestly think that this virtue, humility, should be at the forefront and the core of our philosophy. There's a motivational speaker by the name of Dr. Rigsby, and I think that he says it best. He says that he said in a commencement ceremony for California State University, he said that make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. And then he goes on to say, ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. And then later on, he says, if you're going to do a job, do it right. And I talk to my girls about servant leadership, right? How are you filling your cup by helping other people? Um, and then in doing that, our ego gets pushed aside and to be the humble person in the sight of everyone you come in contact with. I think the best way to wrap that up, to wrap this whole presentation up, is by quoting the famous John Wooden, the UCLA basketball coach. And then he said, "There's no limit to what we can accomplish when no one cares who gets the credit." Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope that you gained something, learned what humility is and how we can coach it and teach it and model it in our everyday lives. I pray that on your journey through this master's course, that we take these virtues that we're learning and that we utilize them in our lives, and we truly make an impact, and we become transformational coaches to any of our athletes that we come in contact with. Yeah. Have a blessed day or night wherever you are in the world, and thank you so much for listening, and I appreciate you. God bless you in your ministry and your coaching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.